There's a certain kind of person who doesn't feel relieved when they gain more, but when they remove things. While most people are driven by accumulation, more possessions, more choices, more stimulation, these individuals feel a quiet sense of clarity when things are reduced. A cleaner space, fewer commitments, less noise. From the outside, it may look like a lifestyle trend or an aesthetic preference. But psychologically, minimalism often reflects something much deeper about how a person processes complexity, emotion, and control in an increasingly overwhelming world. At its core, a minimalist lifestyle is not about having less. It is about reducing unnecessary cognitive load. The human brain has a limited capacity for attention, yet modern environments constantly compete for it. Every object, every notification, every unfinished task silently demands mental energy. For some individuals, this accumulation creates a background level of stress that is difficult to ignore. Minimalists tend to be more sensitive to this effect. They don't just see clutter, they feel it. It translates into distraction, restlessness, and a subtle inability to fully focus. By simplifying their environment, they are not just organizing their space, they are regulating their mental state. This is closely tied to decision fatigue. Every choice, no matter how small, requires cognitive effort. What to wear, what to eat, what to buy, what to focus on. These micro-decisions accumulate throughout the day. For most people, this process runs automatically. But for those drawn to minimalism, the accumulation of choices becomes noticeable and draining. Reducing options is not about limitation, it is about efficiency. When there are fewer variables to manage, the mind can operate with more clarity. This is why many minimalists intentionally simplify routines, not because they lack creativity, but because they are protecting their mental energy for things that matter more. Another important psychological factor is the desire for control, not control over outcomes, but control over inputs. The external world is unpredictable, filled with variables that cannot be managed. But the immediate environment can be shaped. For minimalists, simplifying that environment creates a sense of stability. When there are fewer distractions, fewer unnecessary objects, and fewer competing demands, the mind feels less scattered. This controlled simplicity becomes a form of psychological grounding. It is not about perfection, it is about predictability. Emotionally, minimalism is often connected to selective detachment. People who are drawn to this lifestyle tend to question the emotional value of what they own and what they engage with. They are less likely to attach identity to possessions and more likely to evaluate whether something truly adds value. This creates a filtering mechanism. If something does not serve a clear purpose, practical or emotional, it is removed. Over time, this habit extends beyond physical objects. It influences relationships, commitments, and even thought patterns. The same question repeats: is this necessary? This mindset is often shaped by past experiences. Individuals who have gone through periods of overwhelm, whether emotional, financial, or psychological, may develop a preference for simplicity as a protective strategy. When life has felt chaotic or excessive, minimalism becomes a way to prevent that state from returning. It is not always a conscious decision. It is an adaptation. By reducing external complexity, they reduce the likelihood of internal overload. There is also a strong connection between minimalism and introspection. When external distractions are removed, attention naturally turns inward. This can lead to greater self-awareness, but it also removes a layer of avoidance. Many people use noise, consumption, or constant stimulation to distract themselves from uncomfortable thoughts. Minimalists, intentionally or not, reduce these distractions. As a result, they are more likely to confront their own thoughts directly. This is why minimalism can feel calming for some and unsettling for others. It creates silence, not just externally, but internally. Another key aspect is intentionality. Minimalists tend to make decisions more deliberately. Instead of passively accumulating things or commitments, they actively choose what to include in their life. This creates a stronger alignment between values and behavior. Time is not filled automatically. It is allocated. Attention is not scattered, it is directed. This level of intentional living often leads to a greater sense of clarity because fewer things compete for importance. However, minimalism is not always driven purely by clarity. For some individuals, it also reflects a rejection of external definitions of success. In many societies, value is associated with accumulation. owning more, achieving more, displaying more. Choosing minimalism can be a way of stepping outside that system. It is not necessarily a statement, but it functions as one. It shifts the focus from external validation to internal satisfaction. Instead of asking, "What do I have?" the question becomes, "What do I actually need?" From a neurological perspective, simplified environments reduce sensory input, which allows the brain to process information more efficiently. This is particularly important for individuals who are more sensitive to stimuli. Excessive visual or auditory input can lead to cognitive overload, making it harder to focus or relax. Minimalist environments, by contrast, create fewer interruptions. This does not just improve productivity, it changes how the mind feels on a baseline level. There is less noise competing for attention, which creates a sense of mental space. Over time, minimalism can become part of identity. It is no longer just about decluttering or simplifying. It becomes a lens through which decisions are made. What to keep, what to remove, what to prioritize. This identity is reinforced by the benefits it creates. Less stress, more clarity, greater control over attention. As these benefits accumulate, the behavior becomes self-sustaining. The individual is not forcing themselves to live minimally. It becomes the most natural way for them to function. However, like any psychological pattern, minimalism can become rigid if it is taken too far. The desire to reduce can turn into an aversion to anything perceived as excess. This can create unnecessary limitations and even anxiety around acquiring or keeping things. When minimalism shifts from being a tool to being a rule, it loses its flexibility. The goal is not to eliminate everything, it is to remove what does not serve a purpose. Maintaining this distinction is essential for keeping the lifestyle adaptive rather than restrictive. Another subtle but important element is emotional clarity. When there is less external distraction, emotional signals become easier to notice. Feelings are not buried under constant input. This allows individuals to process emotions more directly, rather than avoiding them through consumption or distraction. While this can be uncomfortable at times, it also leads to a more stable internal state. Emotions are experienced, understood, and resolved, rather than continuously postponed. Minimalism also affects how individuals relate to time. With fewer distractions and commitments, time becomes more visible. It is not filled automatically. This creates both opportunity and responsibility. Without constant stimulation, individuals must decide how to use their time intentionally. For some, this leads to greater productivity. For others, it leads to deeper reflection. In both cases, time becomes something to engage with consciously, rather than something that simply passes. Ultimately, people who are drawn to a minimalist lifestyle are not trying to deprive themselves. They are trying to remove what interferes with clarity. Their focus is not on absence, but on precision. What stays is what matters. What goes is what distracts. This filtering process is not about perfection. It is about alignment. And that is the key psychological difference. While others manage complexity, minimalists reduce it. While others adapt to noise, they eliminate it. While others accumulate, they refine. Because for them, the goal is not to have less. It is to feel less overwhelmed, less distracted, and less divided in their attention. And when those layers are removed, something else becomes noticeable, not something added, but something that was always there. Clarity.